There's a lot of fearful victims now, worried that come the end of September, the beginning of October, the perpetrators of crimes against them will be targeting them, intimidating them, threatening them, and even worse, attacking them. So we need to look at this carefully, and the victims' voices really need to be heard on this issue.
Now, it's understood that government ministers have fewer than 24 hours to assess which criminals can face early release. As the government wrestles with overcrowding in prisons, Andy Burnham halted the controversial early release scheme in England and Wales after he was warned that a failure to put in place safeguards could put victims at particular risk. And in a surprise intervention by the National Police Chiefs Council, their lead for criminal justice reform, Assistant Chief Constable Jason Devonport, has said the plans will mean Britain will have fewer neighbourhood police officers and more offenders at large in communities under the scheme. Well, joining me now is Mark Fairhurst, who's National Chair of the Prison Officers Association. Mark, good evening to you.
Good evening.
Let's just set out where we're at the moment. How bad is the situation currently in prisons?
It's not too bad as we speak. We've probably got about 2,000 spare spaces in the adult closed male estate, which was the part of the estate that was experiencing the most difficulties. So not too bad for now, but we certainly need early releases to free up capacity so we can satisfy the courts in the future.
OK, and look, we understand that there's less than 24 hours to assess which criminals can face early release. This would be released right at the beginning of September, wouldn't it? We think this is on pause, but I think if the situation does need to go ahead, then decisions need to be made within the next 24 hours. Do those decisions happen at prison level? Do prison governors get involved? How much say do they have here? I presume they have a fair bit in determining whether someone should be released or not, or do they just have to accept the orders based on the parameters of that particular scheme?
Yes, so the only people involved in these particular discussions, which have moved at pace today with an expected announcement tomorrow, will be the directors, the leaders of the prison service, in correlation with government ministers and the Secretary of State for Justice. So we expect an announcement tomorrow on who's exempt, if there are exemptions, and probably the early releases will then start to give everybody, including probation staff, enough time to prepare, probably start around the 1st of October.
And we see here details when we talk about what we might get tomorrow. I mean, one of the ideas being floated is that Andy Burnham will focus on preventing the release of child sexual abuse perpetrators. That is one idea. I mean, is that acceptable to you? So I suppose what we're talking about is the early release of still potentially dangerous criminals, but just not those guilty of child sexual abuse.
Well, I, along with a lot of victims of crime, are in favour of previous exemptions from previous early release schemes where sexual offenders, violent offenders and those convicted of domestic abuse were exempt from any early release schemes. And we would welcome that announcement again. I've read the same as you, where it's alleged that sex offenders, including rapists and child abusers, will not be released. That's right, that's proper. But I feel there's a sense of injustice if that's the only exemptions in place for victims of crime. There's a lot of fearful victims now, worried that come the end of September, the beginning of October, the perpetrators of crimes against them will be targeting them, intimidating them, threatening them, and even worse, attacking them. So we need to look at this carefully, and the victims' voices really need to be heard on this issue.
Yeah, I mean, this story came to light and Andy Burnham was first forced to comment on it because the family of PC Andrew Harper had expressed such outrage that his killers may be eligible for early release. This would be two of her son's killers, Jesse Colin Albert Boas, who would be eligible under this scheme. If it was just exemptions for child rapists and other perpetrators of serious sexual abuse, then by the letter of this so far, those killers of PC Andrew Harper would still be released.
Yeah, that's correct. And it's looking more likely, isn't it, that will be the case if the rumours are true. So what exemptions are going to be put in place, but more importantly, what protections for the victims of crime are we going to endorse for them? So will there be tagging, GPS tagging? Will there be extreme supervision with probation staff, which is doubtful because probation are on their knees. They haven't got the resources to cope with, 6,000 early releases is predicted between the end of October and the beginning of next June. So There are some dilemmas, and it's a tough decision for the government. Let's get this right. We do need to free up space to satisfy the courts after decades of underinvestment and the closure of public sector prisons, which has lost us over 10,000 cell spaces. So we do need to release people early, but there's a way of releasing people early. Long term, we have to do a lot better and really review entirely who we incarcerate in this country.
Yeah. Who would you like to see exempt from early release?
Well, I would like it in line with previous early release schemes, so that's sexual offenders, those convicted for violent offences, and those who are domestic abusers. Those three categories, I think, would go some way to satisfying victims of crime and leave them feeling that there is at least some sense of justice for them.
Yeah, but for families like that of PC Andrew Harper, they will feel that it's still injustice for them, and I'm sure they are like many other families for whom killers are being are subject to early release. I mean, we will get that time and time again, won't we?
It is, and I feel for them, and it's not right. There is no justice for those victims of crime. This is a really serious offence, isn't it? The PC Harper case, it's manslaughter. Why should people who've been convicted of manslaughter get released early? It just feels so wrong, and I'm with the victims on this, but this is a consequence of cuts. We need to invest in our prisons. We need to create more spaces. We need to look at sentencing policy long term. We bang up too many female offenders who are victims of crime themselves, non-violent offences. Do we need to incarcerate people who are in for non-violent offences? But we need to invest in our probation service as well, so the public have faith in community sentences.
Yeah. Is there, so just to sort of go back to one question I have, which is talking about the kind of criminals due for early release, and actually how much sway a prison officer feeding into a prison governor, or a prison governor looking at a prisoner's record, which is contributed to by prison officers, how much sway that would have. It would, I mean, we are talking about a lot of criminals here, but prison by prison, surely it wouldn't be so much that there could be some intervention and some judgment offered by prison governors.
No, let me be blunt here. Prison governors do not listen to prison officers. If they listen to prison officers, the prisons would be in a much better state than what they are. So we can only write reports. We can only report on prisoners' behaviour and their attitudes and how they conform. All that can be ignored on an early release, because all the government are interested in is creating space so they don't run out of space when the court backlog catches up with us. So that has no bearing whatsoever. It does on parole reports, but in this instance, I think it's more a case of what's the sentence length? What are they in for? They're not exempt, so let's release them. So
a violent offender who has behaved badly in prison, but maybe hasn't had formal sanction for that, they would still be, up for early release, just like a violent offender who may have been through some amount of reform within prison, who may have taken up an occupation whilst they're there. They'd be given equal pegging.
Well, I would think if you're violent in prison, there would be sanctions. You'd be subject to internal disciplinary procedures where an external judge could award you added days, or you could be subject to further charges from the police if it's a particularly violent attack. So I hope there would be sanctions, but let's be clear, if you are serving a standard determinate sentence, you are eligible for early release.
Yeah, OK. Well, this will be announced tomorrow, it is understood. So some serious offenders will be eligible for release halfway through their sentence rather than 2/3 of the way through. And those convicted of less serious crimes can be freed after serving a third of their sentence instead of 40%. Mark, thanks for talking it through with us. Appreciate it. Mark Fairhurst, who's National Chair of the Prison Officers Association.